Ray Rosher, it is such a pleasure and an honor to have you. I mean, mostly we do fly fishing people, and we did Skip Smith, an offshore guy, but to have you in the podcast is really a treasure. And
thank you.
Not only that, you're being inducted into the IGFA Captain and Crew Hall of Fame this year.
Yeah,
so,
that's pretty cool.
What's that mean to you?
It means I'm getting old.
But you did a lot of things well, and let me define what that means. So the International Game Fish Association, they annually recognize captains and guides or crew members who have made extraordinary contributions to recreational angling through innovation, leadership, or outstanding accomplishments in their trade. So that's a huge accomplishment.
Oh, thanks.
Not many people get in there.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. Well, let's start with your family. Charmaine was on your boat. You worked together for a long time.
Yeah.
Tell me about when you first met her.
Well, on the water, catching bait, and gave her a couple boats around us and threw the net and got a bunch of bait. And
so they were catching bait with sabiki rigs,
yeah.
3 at a time or whatever.
I hate to admit it, but it was a little bit of just a little sympathy, like, hey, told my mate to give these guys, poor people some bait.
You threw your cast in and got the whole school.
Anyways, that's where it kind of started, and we ended up, going on a date, and the rest was history. And it's been then she was a lawyer, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool, she'll have her life, and I'll be. And I didn't realize how much she worked. She worked long hours, and that kind of matched my schedule. And then I think we were engaged, and I met Kit Toomey, old friend in Miami, and he'd bought a boat, and he called me one day and said, hey, come check my boat out. I didn't know anything beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I'm with my girlfriend. Oh yeah, we'll bring her over. So we checked out the boat, 53 Hatters. Viking, and he proposed the idea of us fishing tournaments together, which wasn't really like something I expected, and we worked at it. I told him, I got charter boat and I need to be focused on that. And he's like, yeah, well, we can schedule it. And, I said, I think that'll work. And then she pipes up and says, well, if you're going to do that, I want to do it with you. And I looked at her like, I said, that's like $100 a day, honey. And she's like, that's fine. And just my heart sunk. My rich girlfriend just became my poor wife. I thought I had it made, man.
That's really funny. You thought you were marrying up.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
But
the funny part was I said to Kid, I'm like, are you okay with this? And, he didn't help me out. He's like, oh, no, that'll be fine. And I'm thinking, God, I just wish he'd say no. I hate to admit it, but, that's what I was really thinking.
So
and then
funny.
it just evolved from there, and we ended up fishing 8 seasons together, and I think we won 13 tournaments together, and those were all just great memories. Of course, I got to give a lot of credit to Kit and Peter Miller.
Sure.
And John Cooper, Froggy Cooper. I went to high school with him, and right here at Gillian High School next to me, and he was a world champion spear fisherman, represented the United States. So he had that mentality of tournament fishing, and we all just morphed into a team that was just a dream. It really was a dream team. And we had a lot of fun together, and I'm really indebted to those guys, and we had so much fun.
Well, we'll talk about your tournament success here in a little bit, but when you first walk into your home, you've got deer and antelope, or your big hunters. But let's talk about your children. I mean, your fleet is named after your Brittany, your daughter.
Yep.
Cheyenne's got a name on one of your boats.
Yep, that's
and
right.
Dakota, your son,
he gets a job.
He's in camo. He's throwing a fly rod in the backyard. Family, I can see, really means so much to you.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll push your wheelchair when you're old.
Right.
Treat them well.
Nikki, are you listening?
Yeah, I'm pushing your wheelchair right off a cliff. Keep it up.
Oh, man.
So let's get back to this award. You're being you're getting this award along with Carl Anderson, Brad Simons,
Yep.
Paul Spencer, from Spencer Boats, Gene Vanderhook.
Yeah.
Tell
friends.
Tell me about these guys.
They're all people I consider friends, and all of them are deserving and just wonderful people. So that's what a a great group to be joining that honor with.
Right.
Really cool.
We've done a little bit of offshore stuff. During the series Sportsman's Journal that I hosted, we were in St. Thomas with Jim Lambert on the reel tight.
Yeah.
Eddie Herbert was the captain, I remember.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. We caught a real big fish. I caught one on a fly, but
wow.
The whole dynamics of what happens with that offshore world.
Jim Lambert in the evenings when I fished St. Thomas with Bill Harrison and Ralph Christensen down he was from Puerto Rico, but when in the evenings we'd go by the dock and they would be in there watching film. So it was like football team, Jim's in there, if we do this on this situation, and
videos from the day of fishing. Fish.
Yeah, he approached it very strategically and intelligently, and all of his crew, all of us actually, everybody benefited because it just kind of, all that knowledge permeates the fleet. Not saying he taught everybody, but it certainly didn't hurt that there was analysis and intelligence applied to the.
Right.
And it was back when pitch baiting just became. Teasing was really coming on the scene,
and pitch a bait behind the fish.
Yeah, whether you're throwing a fly or a hooked bait, it was really an art, and that's what they were. Those were the problems they were solving. And the best Jim Lambert story was I was there the day it happened. They got so good at teasing as a team. He said, those things that eat anything, they'd eat a beer can. And Jim liked to drink Miller Lite, so they poked a hole in the bottom and made the deal up with the hook, and they pitched it out there, and the blue marlin ate it. And I've never seen a fish on film jump as many times as that blue marlin did.
With a can stuck in its mouth.
Right.
Didn't you do that as well?
I did that. I did that with him too.
Yeah.
He showed me.
Oh, okay.
We taped a big old 9-0 hook to a beer can, and we caught this monster.
That might have been the same day. We might have been there together.
It was crazy.
I don't know how many times he did it. I don't know if it's the same day.
Maybe it was a trick he did with everybody who got on.
Yeah, made it seem like it was special.
Did that change the way you guys caught blue marlin, the bait and switch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's become the technique of choice, and what it really did was open the door for world record fishing and light tackle fishing for blue marlin, because you get a little chance to size them up. So now you actually can have 2 or 3 line classes ready and pitch the right rod. And of course, sometimes you pitch the wrong rod. But the bottom line is it did grow the sport by another notch.
Mm-hmm.
It turned. So I remember on the Get Lit with Kit and Peter, we fished the Drambuie tournament in Key West. And, I had fished St. Thomas a fair amount with Bill Harrison and Ralph, and done some teaser fishing here and there. And we decided to try to, have some lighter tackle. Kit and Peter were great anglers, and we went to Key West with a rocket launcher, not a fighting chair. And I remember people looking at us like, "What? Where's your chair?" kind of deal.
Yeah. What's a rocket launcher for some people?
It's a post in the center of the cockpit with a table that holds rods. So obviously you can't use it to your advantage fighting a fish on heavy tackle. Mm-hmm. You don't have a seat to attach a harness. All stand up. And I'm not saying we originated stand-up fishing. I'm just saying that we took that to Key West for a tournament in the first 20 minutes. Oh, and I remember getting ready the night before. Charmaine was there, and the guy next to us made a comment about it. Like the Florida fish, where you would get what's the right word? Prejudices. People said, "Oh, these Florida fish, fish in Florida don't tease like they would." And I said something about, hey, we catch them in St. Thomas on teasers, and you can get them on light tackle. And well, you're not in St. Thomas. Is kind of how it went. And I swear to you, the next morning, 20 minutes into the day, 300-pounder rolls up on the teaser, and I hand pulled it. We didn't have a setup with all the electric reels. I just hand pulled it, and Peter pitched it. Ballyhoo chugger, boom, got him on. Caught a 300-pounder on 50 stand up, and it was just. It's to this day one of my favorite fish because it made us feel good about our approach, and we enjoyed the fish more than if we had a 130 in a chair.
Right.
Fish jumped a lot, and we just had a great time.
Didn't the bait and switch also improve your hookup ratio as well, or is that not true?
No, that is true. Because when you're trolling lures, Ralph Christensen on the Pescador that Bill and I fished with a lot, he would document everything, and we were. I would say the standard is somewhere between 50 and maybe 70% would be great numbers. And pitch baiting, you should be much higher.
So what are the numbers in pitch baiting?
I would say you want to hit somewhere 80-90%. And of course, in any sport where inches count, that one extra fish out of 10 bites in a tournament sometimes wins the tournament.
Right.
Yeah, so what it is basically, if you don't mind me saying, if you're trolling a hooked bait, they come up and eat it from behind, the hook's going away from them.
Yep.
So the hookup is not that very good. So when you pitch it behind the fish, you pull the teaser out of the water, pop that bait behind them, they turn and you get that bite going away.
Yeah. And even if he misses it on that first going away bite and he comes in behind it, if you have a natural bait, when they bite on it, a lot of times they'll go ahead and ingest that bait. And now you've got a chance for a circle hook, the corner of the mouth, better for the fish long term. So,
yep.
And a lot of times fish hooked on a circle hook jump a lot, tire themselves out. Anytime we hooked a fish 2 weeks ago in Miami on the kite, on 20, blue marlin, at least 200 pounds. And the fish, it just so happened, we were on an open fisherman, and I ran to the bow with the angler, and one of my other captains got on the wheel. So I was with the angler, coaching him on finger pressure. As soon as he'd give a little, or Austin would make a little ground on him, we were pulling little short strokes, trying to just really gate everything we could. And the fish went down deep and got so much line dragging and eventually broke the leader. So you can't, making a fish jump has added benefits. You keep him up shallow, you can retrieve line. Fish goes down 200, 300, 400 feet, you're done.
You can't chase them
on
underground.
a big fish.
Yeah. Well, you started off at a very young age. You're third generation fisherman out of Miami, but you're the first commercial member of the family chasing these fish. But you were on a 35 Bertram sword fishing at 18.
I was actually about 16. It was a 38. Actually, that was a cool cat. That was a 36 ensign with Bob Lewis. And Bob was the one that kind of pioneered modern kite fishing, with, at least in the East Coast. He patented the first kite. So Pomponette made them and so on. Anyways, my dad bowled with Bob on Thursday nights. It's just, how life goes sometimes. And his son Jimmy was my best friend, and we hung out at the bowling alley together and started fishing together on weekends. And I looked sad long enough that Bob finally, hired me. Jimmy was always going with his dad, and I just sad faced him. He let me come. I didn't know anything, but I was about 16 when I remember it because we caught a sailfish with the boss of the guy who owned the boat, and he had the sailfish mounted, and it said July 10th, 1979. So that's how I always remembered. I'd go in his house and see it.
Wow.
Did you always want to be a captain ever since a young age?
I was going to be a plumber. So my dad dropped out of 10th grade to be a plumber, and ended up being went to the military and became a CB, which is, construction battalion. And it was just in his blood. That's what he wanted to do. And he was a plumbing contractor for 50 years. I was his only son. And so, as soon as I could move a shovel, 12 years old, I was summers with him. And that's probably what made me want to be a fisherman. So I actually went to college for 5 years studying construction management. And, but I was fishing 5 days a week and went to school on Tuesday, Thursdays. That's why it took a while.
Right.
And long story short, when I was done, by then I'd kind of elevated to to a captain's position, and I had that tough conversation with my dad that this is what I want to do. And thank goodness he really was kind to me and gave me his blessing, and the rest was history.
That's cool. You just finished a tournament over the last 3 days or so. How'd that work out for you?
6 for 8, and never can you sail fishing is a lot about numbers. And the guy who won had a 6-bagger and caught 5 out of it, and great fisherman. I fished with him before, and JC, and just we didn't get the multiples.
Right.
A bunch of singles.
So I can't imagine you call it a 6-bagger. So you've got how many baits in the
7.
water? You got 7 baits,
Yeah.
and you catch 6 fish
Yeah.
on that one short period of time.
Yeah.
What's it like to see 6 fish under 6 hooks or whatever?
Yeah, I've had 6 on. Never caught 6. I've caught 5 out of a 6, bagger. But a couple of my crew have caught 6 at a time, and it's just, it's all. I just call it this way: tips together. just get all your tips together because it's this.
They're all crossed.
And if you separate, that twist goes down the line and eventually
the angles get tight.
and they'll burn them off.
Oh, interesting.
So it's all about tips together. That's what wins. That's what wins a multiple.
So you're standing side by side, all the anglers are
Yeah,
standing
they're
side by
all
side?
How tight are the tips of the rods?
I'm talking an inch. I want them an inch away.
All 6 rods are this
As
close.
if they're threatened. Now, obviously, if one's over here and one's over there, you're
You
fine.
can separate, yeah.
But anytime you get lines anywhere near each other, so it's not 6 rods at one time, but it's multiple rods. You want them. I can't tell you how many times. I had 3 fish one time that we basically grabbed 3 leaders at once. They just swam side by side. So you got, and when they change position, you better respond. And it's not a big deal if they change position and the angles all stayed and you were just gently rubbing, but it's when they go opposite directions, something's got to give. So that's the ticket, is keeping it's tangle management.
I was watching a video of you this morning, actually. I got up really early. We've been on the road for this whole last week doing podcasts all over the state. But I'd never seen you in action. And I thought this morning, I got up at like 5:30. I said, I want to see Ray in action. There's a little video of you on YouTube. And it's daunting to me. It's just like, oh my God. It's just scary to see all these rods all lined up under 3 kites.
Yeah, we had 17 baits is the most I've fished, but some guys have fished more.
You've had 17 baits in the water.
Yeah, it's when you're meat fishing. So they have these tournaments where it's dolphin, kingfish, wahoo, tuna, cobia. So you're going to fly, some guys, I've never done it, fly 5 kites. 2 heavily leaded way out here. Now, of course, you need the right wind. You need that 12 to 15 knots of wind.
5 kites.
So 2 this way, then 2 with less lead, and then 1 down the middle. You can have 3 baits per kite. Actually, you can have more. I just figured out a way to put 6 baits on a kite. But, and I'm probably going to do it.
Oh my gosh.
How hard is it to evolve to be able to effectively fish that many baits and kites?
Well, the big thing to remember with kites is start out with 1 bait, 1 kite. And
That's you and me, Nick.
That's what we did.
1 bait, 1
That's
kite.
what we did.
We get seasick in 30 minutes and we're golfing in an hour and a half.
No,
You're good.
we always say the goggle eyes in our live well are the luckiest goggle eyes in the world.
Yeah.
Because we'll just let them off on the dock when we're coming back in.
We go offshore for 45 minutes and we look at each other and see who gets green first. And then we run back to the dock and let all these goggle eyes swim away at the dock.
Golly.
We are the worst.
I need to give you a bait pin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good question. Brings up a good question. How important is bait and good, healthy bait?
It's the ultimate
It's everything.
part of what we do, yeah. So we even season the baits, try to get them to eat. And so when a bait is caught, it has thin slime in nature. And when you bring it into, when you say an ocean going bait, like a goggle eye, and bring it into, an estuary or bay, a lot of things can cause it to get infection. So the slime on a goggle eye is very much like your physical skin, to give you a comparison. If you take away a piece of your skin, you're going to develop a scab. Same thing happens with a bait when you take away a slime. So slime management is real important to get them. Use a wire dehooker. Don't touch the bait. The baits we're going to use for a tournament, if they hit the deck, they go overboard. We don't use them.
Amazing.
So you have
never
to preserve.
touch the bait.
That's it.
But what happens in a pen if they rub against the side of the pen or something like that?
We even built nets with clear vinyl bottoms so they hold water, so they don't even get dry. That's for when they're fresh and that slime coat's thin. But once they're in captivity, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 days typically before they'll eat some real choice food like eggs or roe. So, krill. Those 2 things are probably the most edible or most palatable things for the bait, or attractive things. And then once you get them eating, now they're calming down, they're eating, and what happens next is their slime coat thickens. When you hold a fresh goggle eye, if I catch a goggle eye this morning and I hold him like this, he won't go anywhere. In other words, his slime coat's so thin, I can grip his skin, his physical skin. But once he's been in the pen for 2 weeks, I have to grab him like this, where his nose is cradled between these 2 fingers, or else he'll shoot out of my hand like a grape seed or a orange seed. You know what I mean? So
the slime is so much thicker and healthy.
That's their what's the right word? That's their the way they combat bacteria and infection. Right. So that slime coat gets built, and then now they're called seasoned. They were doing this in California decades ago. The seasoned baits, they had the big bait handlers. out there, the big barge. And
I've seen that.
Those are seasoned baits. And it took a while before, we caught onto it here, but that's kind of what spawned the tackle business. A lot of what we do is build things for catching the bait, pinning the bait, seasoning the bait, feeding the bait, and then hook now, a lot of tackle for fishing.
So that slime coat, does that necessarily mean that the bait's going to have more energy, or is that just longevity of the bait?
Both. So you take a fresh bait you bought this morning that someone caught at daylight, and it might kick real hard for 20, 30 minutes on the kite. You take a seasoned bait, and literally 45 minutes or an hour later, it's just got energy stores. It's no different than a bye week in football, right? They just rest,
right,
eat, get stronger, let their bodies regenerate. And that's what pen bait is, or seasoned
Does
bait.
the same go for ballyhoo?
Ballyhoo are actually a funny fish. A lot of people used to say when I was young, ballyhoo are so fragile and this and that. Well, they netted them. So a net is very much just like sandpaper to fish. So if I net pilchards or net ballyhoo and put them in a pen, 2 to 3 days, they're dead, if not sooner. So a lot of people misunderstood ballyhoo to think they were super fragile, but if you'll hook and line them, which we do now on sabikis, they're actually one of the most durable. But I've never kept them to season them. That's kind of an interesting question. I think they would only get better and stronger, but they live well in a pen. And I remember...
Interesting.
So here's a funny little thing. Skip Smith one time teased me because we built, when I was early years, commercial bait fishing and building tackle to bait fish, and we'd build a bait pen out of PVC. Well, of course, we didn't have the ovens to make the hoops and this and that. We just squared them off. And what we found was once they got in that square and maybe a few of them died off, the ones that are in there, it's like snook, right? They just swim a circle, inside of, they'll sit still. They're pretty calm baits. And so we built some bait pens that were round and oval, and then we built some square ones. And I was at a little tackle thing one day, and Skip Smith walked up to me. I had a square bait pen there, and he said, he just lit into me. He's like, what in the world is that? Like he's such a good fisherman and such a smart guy. He knew how to push my buttons. He was challenging me on my intelligence. He was just like, what in the world? No bait ever lives in there. I should have caught on. He's got a great sense of humor, and he just got me all worked up. And I started on my little.
But he didn't tell you. He didn't.
Oh, he was ready. So he got me going, and I got to get ready for my little seminar on bait and this and that. And finally, he let me go a little bit, and finally he goes, settle down here. Let me show you this. You're going to need this. He was like, he was coaching me. So Chris Fisher, great white shark, search, good friend. He had sent Skip a picture of 3 60-pound yellowfins in a square ballast tank on his research vessel. So 10-foot by 10-foot ballast tank. They put 3 60-pound yellowfins, and they were just swimming happy as could be in that circle. He goes, I'm going to forward this video to you because you're going to need it because you got some arguments to win. So my point is, dead baits would go ballyhoo, back to your question about ballyhoo. If you put netted baits in a square pen, they'll get in the corner because they're just disoriented.
Right.
Get in a corner, and now they're pushing.
It's a dead end.
No water flow. They die. And so people would misunderstand that to say, oh, that square bait pen killed them. Square bait pens don't kill bait. Poor handling, etc. Hitting the deck. So anyways, that's my little dissertation on bait.
How many baits do you have in a pen right now that you're raising?
Me, none. Because we have something, it's kind of interesting you brought that up. My whole life I've penned baits. And in our marinas, in the last 4 years, we've gotten something called the spins. And it's only happening really in Ocean Reef, for the most part, Ocean Reef, some Miami marinas. And now it's starting to grow. A guy from Fort Lauderdale called me 2 days ago, 70 dozen goggle eyes. He's like, hey, tell me about this spinning bait thing. And the baits will just start spinning circles in the pen. And the reason I think it's worth talking about is I really believe this is something worth investigating. And I've mentioned it to biologists and scientists, and nobody has really made any headway with it. But I worry because if it's doing that to what is a seasoned bait, which in my opinion is a stronger bait than a native bait or natural bait in the wild, if it can do that to that, what is it doing to a jacks and the snook and the snappers? I was at this tournament. I pulled up to get fuel up in Hillsborough Inlet, and they said that they started seeing it. And the guy, there was an old timer there that I was talking to, And he said, you know what was funny? When our baits were spinning, there were no catfish around the marina and no snappers. Who knows if they died or they just left. So not trying to get off on a tangent.
Bad water.
But this, well, it's not just oxygen. So there's a guy that makes bait food down in the Keys, and he seemed to be the most knowledgeable about it. He had a dissertation on it, but I don't know the solution. He said one of the things he says, you take a spinning bait, you cut his tail. If the blood is brown, he's got it. And it was something to do with their brain. And I mean, I hate that I'm not more versed on it, but there's something going on. And by the way, Ocean Reef is right there on the Hawks Channel.
Water.
You would think that it would be up the Miami River or the New River or somewhere that was maybe
populated.
Yeah, and maybe it had runoff issues, it had fertilizer issues, it had oxygen level issues. And it may be, I think I remember him saying something about oxygen, but there was something in I don't want to say it because I'll say it wrong, but there was something going on in the seafloor, in the mud. And mud gets stirred up and it causes this problem. Don't quote me on that, but the point is there is something going on in the last 4 or 5 years that is alarming to me, and I really would like to. That's something I'm going to dedicate some effort to. And my kids are interested in marine biology to a degree, and that's the next task. My son's working on a lobster thing, and my daughter's working on something else. But we'll get to that. Well, I want them to research, and I want to be a part of that.
Would you contact the FWC or somebody like that to say, hey, this is a red flag?
Yeah, I've talked to them. I've talked to many people about it, but no one seems to know the answer. And, there's so many things that they're on the radar. I think this is such a mysterious thing that I don't see anybody grabbing the ball and running with it. And I plan to do more research into that. It's something that really bothers me. Like I've heard that it happened a little bit down in the Middle Keys too. If something like that takes healthy fish and makes them, here's what's weird. They'll be swimming in the bait pen and they're all looking great. You dip them up and you put them in your live well and they all just start spinning circles. Immediately. It's like you pushed them over the brink.
And they die shortly
thereafter. They die within an hour, typically.
And this is not just goggle eyes. This is ballyhoo,
other baits.
Pilchards.
Pilchards are the least affected by it, which is, again, interesting to research, right?
Huh.
Why doesn't it hit the pilchards as much as it does a goggle eye? Smooth skin baits like goggle eyes and cigar minnows. So in our marina, normally I'd have multiple pens full of all kinds of stuff, and I cannot keep bait in my marina. That's Dinner Key, Coconut Grove. Just to tell you how bad it is, years ago they had the Jimmy Johnson tournament in Ocean Reef. That was the home base. This is only like 3 or 4 years ago. And it was so bad. There's like 100 boats in it. So all these boats come into that marina, and literally almost every bait either died or was dying. And they had boats were going to Coral Gables, lower, Key Largo and other places. They had to go recatch their bait or buy more bait. I'm talking, it was pandemonium. I mean, here's the Super Bowl of all the sailfish tournaments that year. The most money involved in one event, most boats, and the whole marina had a bait issue. And that's why it's kind of shocking. I mean, the guys put bubblers and oxygenators and this and that. Nobody has solved it. To this day, we're still talking about it with guys from Ocean Reef and Crandon Marina, another one that's, close to the shore.
Right.
It's happening in Crandon Marina. Quentin Dieterle on the cutting edge. I heard that he just lost a bunch of bait last week. So we keep thinking, well, maybe it'll go away. And then the next year, we'll get a little hope up. Oh, our baits are doing good. And then month 2 or month 3, boom, it hits again. I mean, I don't want to dominate the conversation about this, but it is something that's on my radar, and I'm going to look into it. But I can't raise bait.
Did that affect the tournament last week?
Yeah, everybody's got to be real creative. I bought my bait, but I fortunately bought bait from guys that are crewmen that know how to handle them. So they did the same thing that I would have done, and I've been very happy.
So it's like you almost had to buy bait daily that had just been caught.
In our charter boats, that's what we're doing now.
You're not trying to catch them.
Oh, we catch some out in the open and use them that day.
Day. You can't pen them.
So what we've noticed on our boats, we have 3 boats in Dinner Key, Coconut Grove, and we keep them in our live well with the pump running. Why that matters, I have no idea. It might be more oxygenation
in your boat.
In our boat. So from one boat, fortunately, we run a lot of sequential days. So it's not that big a deal. Or if I have only one boat fishing the next day, we'll take the bait off the other 2 boats and put in that boat. And that's what we're doing to have that bait live till the next day. Now, all the other rules still apply. Handling, if you use a bait, hook it on and bring it back in, that bait will not, under any circumstances, make it and be in any shape. So we just let our baits go after we use them.
Right.
What about the fishery in Miami as a whole?
Decent.
Decent?
Yeah, we've had a good year this year, actually. Yesterday, one boat caught 10 sails in the tournament, and 15 won it in 2-day tournament. And that all happened in Miami. And interestingly enough, it was a multi-inlet tournament. Lake Worth Inlet, Hillsborough, and Government Cut. The first, I based out of Hillsborough, so I could go either way. And the first day I went up to Lake Worth, up to Palm Beach, and we caught 2 out of 3. And the daily was one with 8 in Miami. So yesterday we burned it down to Miami, and one boat caught 10. We had 5 bites. So, I mean, what I'm getting at is this year, not that you can base the whole year on that weekend, but this year it's been like that. Palm Beach has not had the biggest days. And my 4 biggest numbers in my life happened in Palm Beach. So I'm very partial to Palm Beach. I've had 2 50-bite days there.
So how does that work? Why will all of a sudden one area not have fish when they're basically come down the Gulf Stream? They go in and out as they come down?
I think they're driven by food more than any other thing. Breeding is another issue, but I don't think we're at, breeding season for sailfish typically from what I've seen is in the spring, and we're not there. So in the wintertime and early spring, it's all driven by food, which of course is driven by water. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, oceanic blue warm water or green, south current, those are all bring different mixtures of food available. And this year, the middle Keys have been the hot spot. So we have
Marathon area?
Yeah, Marathon area. So we have a roughly 5-month tournament called the Sailfish Cup, and you get to pick your days. And one boat is leading it with 55 in 2 days.
55 sailfish in 2 days.
Yeah, caught. 54, I think it is. Mm-hmm. But anyways, they had a 30-something day and a 20-something day.
Yeah. Do you have a problem with sharks when you're sailfishing?
I was about to come out of my mouth. That's the next challenge I see for the sailfish population.
You're losing sailfish to sharks.
So I've sat on some federal boards. The South, we have federal and state management, right? And I've been a part of the Dolphin Wahoo Advisory Panel for over 10 years, and we would get involved in a few other, discussions with other members of different boards and panels, and enough to understand what's changing. And what really changed is they've passed some laws now that have banned prohibited sale of shark fins. And they've gone from what I believe was 22 shark permits from North Carolina to Key West down to 2. And I believe those guys are on the verge of not even doing it anymore because they can't sell the fin, so it's not profitable. So what you've done is you've taken an apex predator. I get it that you need to protect sharks in certain areas, but a lot of the people that are behind the management aren't in the field seeing it, and they're not listening to the people, and many times not listening to the people in the field. But what I've seen in the last 3 years of my life is stunning, the amount of shark attacks there are on the water.
It's interesting.
Never seen it before in my life.
I had dinner with Chris Trossett in the Lower Keys in November. I said, how many fish do you lose to sharks on a daily basis, regardless of what you're fishing for? He said 50%.
That's crazy.
And I feel like, okay, with such an imbalance, I would feel guilty being in an industry where I'm hooking fish, sport fish, and sharks are killing them. Yeah. So we're out there killing fish.
Yeah. I mean, the double-edged sword is I hope that it doesn't impact sport fishing, right? Because unfortunately, some people can misconstrue it and say the sport fishing is a problem. Well, it was never a problem for decades before now. Mm-hmm. The problem is an imbalanced harvest. And I'm not talking about killing the last buffalo. I'm not endorsing that at all. We want balanced harvest. By the way, we eat bull shark. I've eaten it many times. If you kill the fish quickly, dispatch it, bang stick, You can bleed them. There's things you can do to get that are, in my opinion, humane. And then you bring that fish in the boat and gut them, cut the head off, gut them, and there's a pocket of blood against the spine. You cut both sides of that pocket and you scrape it out. It's kind of a congealed blood. You get that out of there and you put them in a slush of salt water and ice. When I clean that meat, it has zero shark odor, and the meat is good. It's pure white. It's I'm not going to say it's grouper, but it ain't bad.
Right.
Fry it up. It's very good. My point in telling you that is, we're not talking about trying to figure out a way to eat a tarpon. We're talking about a fish that is edible, and they've kind of
overpopulated.
What they've really done is criminalized the act of killing a shark.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about an underpopulated species. That's the point.
Right. It's not endangered.
For over 40 years, I never had a sailfish bit. And in the last couple of years, I've had many sailfish bit.
What's the like 1 out of 3 outings?
Oh no, it's not
that
for
much.
me. That's not that much, but it is regional. So like in the
Right.
Palm Beach area where they're diving and feeding the sharks, and I think a lot of people like to attack the shark divers as the problem. I'm not saying that they're the problem, but it certainly, I think, helps the. My point is, I'm not saying there isn't a way to dive with sharks and enjoy the sharks and possibly even feed the sharks. I don't know about that. I don't know enough about it to comment because I've never done it. But I can tell you that when you stop a boat in Palm Beach area today, many times on my recorder I watch it, and here's the shark, and I look over the side, and there they are just swimming onto the boat.
Yeah.
And it's like you've trained them.
But also too, in Isla Morada, you go off to the reef and they hear that boat coming. They know that's the food.
That's why I said I don't want to punish the shark divers. There's a lot of discussion about
everywhere.
that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think they're the main problem, but it isn't helping the feeding part is not helping the issue.
Right.
You would never be allowed to go to Yellowstone and feed a bear. It's just not. That's just not looked at as safe. Right. And I'm not here to attack that group. That's not my goal. But what I am saying is, there are more sharks here than I've ever seen, and they've become, for some reason, not just here. I mean, do you realize in the Hatteras area, they're eating the tunas 50 miles offshore? 50 miles offshore. The Norfolk Canyon in New England is having tunas eaten left and right that never happened. Gulf of Mexico, it's happening. The Keys, it's really happening. And I don't know. I mean, I hate to just talk about two bad subjects in a row, but that's
right.
Those are the things that keep me up at night. And I think I lay in bed and think, what can be done and what's fair and what's right. The reason I mentioned about eating a bull shark is the two sharks. I had a long conversation with Guy Harvey about 6 months ago. We've been friends since I was a very young man. We fished next to each other in Walker's Cay, and he's an amazing person. So we have this long-term respect for each other. And I waited till no one was around because I didn't want to have this conversation in public with him. And I gave him my dissertation on the sharks. And what he didn't realize is I wasn't talking about blacktips and hammerheads and all these other species. It's sandbars and bulls. Those are the two that are causing the problem. And those are the two that were targeted by the longliners the most. A lot of people like to attack longlining. And I agree that longlining is indiscriminate more so than other forms of fishing. But when you talk about shark longlining, if they're tending, what makes a long line a little indiscriminate is when it soaks for 12 hours, or 8 hours or 6 hours. It soaks long enough that fish can die of fatigue. But a shark long line goes out and comes back pretty quick. And again, you have observers. We have the greenest commercial fishing fleet in the world, I believe. Circle hooks, mandated closure areas. There's a lot of things we do right.
Right.
And I believe there is a way to longline sharks ethically and without loss of unwanted
the population.
That, in other words, you can control it very easily in terms of how many permits you give out, what is the closed seasons, et cetera. We have that means. And I really think that's what needs to happen. Unfortunately, Congress just passed a law that banned the sale of shark fins in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, that's how I understood it.
How did Guy Harvey feel about this?
Yeah, I'm sorry I got off on a tangent. But after I had the 45-minute conversation with him, he seemed to change his opinion because bulls and sandbars are edible, they're marketable, and the fins are important if they're, I mean, there's got to be a way to sell them legally and identify them as legal. There's a ratio of weight of fin to weight of meat. In other words, you can't cut the fins off and let the meat go. So my point is, it's a fixable problem, and I wish we could find a way to reduce the numbers of those, bulls and sandbars, and that's really it in a nutshell.
How do you feel about Mark the Shark, who goes out there and targets 1,000-pound, hammerheads and 500-pound bull sharks, and then hangs them high, coming back in government cut?
Yeah. Well, he's obviously made a career of being watched and talked about. All press is good press for him. And I used to be a little more upset with him, and now I like him a little more because he's helping us out with the sharks.
Right.
But he's a character, and I hate to generalize that that's the average charter boat. He has a niche, and he does a good job at it. But that's not the average, personality of the normal, charter guy that I think is a long-term. I mean, he is a wonderful, long-term, hard-working guy, but he's sensational.
Right.
The guys that I have spent most of my life around are very low-key, like Bill Harrison, Bob Lewis, a lot of guys that have just done amazing things, and you don't hear very much about them.
Let's talk about Peter Wright.
Yeah.
One of the greatest offshore captains in the world. I think he's caught more granders than anyone.
77.
He's in the Hall of Fame. 77,000-pound fish.
Documented that weighed, not the ones he let go.
And you fished with him? You fished on his boat in Australia? Tell me a little bit about Peter. And he just died, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just going to say, man, you
God
get me
rest
emotional.
in peace. Yeah.
But, I had the privilege of filming a show with him with Sue Vermillion years ago. And we just, had a great trip and just kind of bonded, And for years after that, we talked a lot. And one day I got the magical phone call that he had to go leave the Sea Baby 4 in the middle of his heavy tackle season in Australia and go get inducted in the Hall of Fame. And he tried to get out of it, and they wouldn't let him in. And he said, if you've got somebody that you think might be able to come over and fish, and you could run the boat, I'll coach you for a week, and then we'll fish that person together, and then you can take over. And I did it, and it was just the most. I get choked up thinking about it. He was amazing. I rode the tower with him. It was his 42nd year. He made it 44, and the things he shared, man. I said to him many times, God, I wish I was recording this. But he's gone, and he gave us great gifts. So, magic.
What kind of things was he telling you?
Just the stories. He still holds the Australian record, I think 1442. And I think it still upsets the Aussies.
An American catching other big fish.
Yeah.
He probably loved it.
He loved it. If you knew Peter, he loved that.
Yeah, he was pretty hard-headed and controversial in a lot of ways. He was not an easy guy to be around.
He was extremely smart. And I'll never forget, he showed me some notes he made of line drag versus related to length, distance, and speed. He said, I was, 10 knotting somewhere, across the ocean. And he said, I decided to do some tests. And he would take, let's just say, 12-pound test, 20, 30, 50, 80, 130. And he'd let them out at 5 knots. He'd put them all out, and he could put a scale on the rod, right? Or a mark on the line, or however he did it. But he measured the amount of resistance. And then he would bump it up to 10 knots, and he'd measure it.
So he had a scale on every rod.
Yeah, he figured out a way. I don't know if it was a whip to floss mark on it, whatever he did. But he would measure it out, arm length. And, okay, it's 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet, 500 feet. And he went on. And his graph was just astounding, what resistance there was. And he says, and by the way, this is a straight pull. He said the only way to measure a curved pull would be like put a bucket or an anchor, tie a line to a marker, and drive a circle around it. He was that guy that would just analyze all this. So he was a big fan of finger pressure, because obviously when that fish is running, and it's with the blue marlin story I told a little bit ago, that once they get ahead of steam and they're deep and that you just get another 100 yards out and another 100 and another 100. I was thinking about Peter while we were pulling on a fish. I'm like, getting too much line out on this thing. And that's why I'm a big fan of a short top shot of mono in the rest braid.
Less drag if they make a turn.
Yeah. So anyways, that was just an example of things that Peter analyzed. And, just a lot of people didn't like him because he was so, I hate to use the word abrasive, but put it this way, he was confident. And when he knew something to be fact,
he fought for
He was
it.
almost like Skip Smith in that baiting you into an argument or a debate.
You won because he knew the answer.
He knew the answer, right?
That's cool.
And that's how you measured his intelligence most of the time. I'm not saying he was never wrong, but he was usually right. And
what was the most important thing that he taught you about catching big marlin, if there was one?
Well, his big thing was don't let him get a lot of line out. His that's one of the big things he preached in the tower.
So chase them down. Don't let them get away.
And if they do get a bunch of line out, which is inevitable on a big fish, turn and run. And
chase them down with the bow.
Yep.
Not backwards.
Yep. Boat, his line was boat's pointy on one end, square on the other. You figure it out. That's the kind of stuff he would say. And of course, that's what bonded us when we filmed that show together is I run single engine charter boats. So there is not much backing down in my world. So that was what kind of got him excited is hooking multiples of sailfish. And the other thing is you kind of learn the behaviors of the fish. Most of the sailfish we catch here on the east coast of Florida, most of them like to go offshore or south. So it's usually a southeast thing. And depending on the wind direction, a lot of times we have east wind. So as soon as we hook up, that fish starts going south and east. Well, a lot of times he bites on the right kite. I'll lift the kite baits on the left up and let him get under. I'll even back up to facilitate that. And now I got him broken out of my spread, and now I can just lay the bow over.
So you lift the kite up to get the baits out of the water.
The baits on the kite.
Yeah.
And
clean it.
That's what the kites give you is that ability to manipulate all your baits to your advantage. If that's where teamwork comes in. Mm-hmm. And anyways, get the fish ahead of you, and now you can putts after them nice and easy. Anglers gaining. You're still fishing. Boom, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And that's what really excited Pete was seeing that you could still focus on fishing while you're fighting a fish. It'd be like being able to catch 2 or 3 tarpon at once. It's a rare opportunity that kites give you.
Right.
Anyways, Pete was real big on keeping the distance short. And also he talked a lot about big marlin. A lot of times before they figure everything out, you can get the leader. And I just went to his memorial 2 nights ago at the IGFA, and one of the guys talked about catching a grander in whatever it was, 3 minutes or something like that. I'm sure there was a lot of whitewater involved, but that's
whitewater involved coming over the back transom.
Gaffs pulling boats.
Right.
A fish of that size. He told us, Charles Perry, who's just an amazing, legendary captain inmate, and told a story about he and Peter Wright's brother gaffing a blue marlin that was taking him to the reef, and they got just outside the reef, and they, the fish went inshore instead of offshore, and they gaffed him, and Peter came down to help, and they're getting everything, and he's scissored on the gaffs, and he's kind of pointing away, and his tail's going and they said, we heard all kinds of noises, but didn't quite know what was going on, and they got him finally subdued and turned into the boat. And Peter went to put it in gear, and the rudders had gotten knocked loose and into the propellers and bent his propellers. He's drifting up on the reef, and one of the other boats came and got him and threw a rope and pulled him off and took him to the mothership. And the bottom line is he was aggressive, and here's the deal:
never leave the wheel.
Yeah, and I don't think there'll be a human on earth that'll ever do what he did. 77 granders. Peter Bristow, if I'm not mistaken, I fished with him also, and I was with him 2 nights ago at the memorial. I think he's weighed 55. But both of those guys, according to Bristow, he spoke and he said, I started the same year Peter did in 1968 in Australia. So you look at that history, those years. And back then, of course, killing a fish was not as taboo as it is today. And a lot of people went there to catch their 1,000-pounder. That was like climbing Everest. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that era is gone. So when I fished with those guys, I asked both of them the same question. How many do you think you released that were over 1,000 that you did not kill? And both of them told me the exact same answer, which was double. So that would mean that Peter Wright's probably caught close to 200 granders, and Peter Bristow's about 150. And that just blows my mind, in that I've never caught one. And I've seen a few that I think were real close to the mark, but and
That's
one or two
incredible.
that I'm sure were over. But, you know, something always went wrong. You know, we had them on, had them off. You know, they're gone.
Right.
And you just, man, it's just staggering to think of what
How
they
many?
accomplished.
Let's just say there's a big ocean, obviously, you know, fishing the Great Barrier Reef.
Mm-hmm.
How does one guy like Peter Wright catch so many more than the others? What is it as a captain? And you know this answer. What do you see out there that other guys don't?
Well, what really happened in that world of grander fishing is they acted on Peter Bristow and Peter Wright and Lori Wright and a bunch of guys that have done it, Brazzacco. They capitalized on an opportunity when it was revealed to them, and all that was lacking was intelligence and strategy. And it's a little bit of a timing thing, right? The development of the boats, the development of tackle, and let's not forget the development of monofilament and braid, you know, Dacron over linen line. Because remember, linen line was, you know, in the Zane Grey Hemingway days. So it was a compilation of many things coming together that needed to happen for those feats to occur. And then you had to have guys that literally dedicated every ounce of their life and souls and time. And unfortunately, family life most times went away because of their focus and dedication. These guys were driven like no other, and that became their life. And you got to give them credit for that. I mean, whether it was the right decision or wrong decision for, you know, other people, that other people wouldn't do it or couldn't do it, they did it.
That's what made them who they are.
That's what made them who they are. And it was all about timing and the alignment of opportunity, technology. Remember, you know, when I started fishing with Bob Lewis, it was all finger ranges and Loran A, Loran C. You know, Ralph Delph was another, just an amazing human being, and all those, you know, guys down there that you know, Trossett, you know, these guys that made something out of nothing, right? They figured out ways to, you know, find spots and to make the opportunities happen for world records and so on. It's just you know, they said it came up a couple times at Peter Wright's memorial that, you know, we lived during the right time. And those times have most of those old guys that got up there to talk said, you know, so happy I saw it. And I know, unfortunately, this next generation won't get to see what we saw. And that's true. It's no different than conquering the West in the United States, you know, the settlers and Indians before them. I mean, you know, the world is about timing.
So I have a question. When you're fishing like Jupiter or Palm Beach or Hillsborough, when you go out there in the open ocean, because we're flats guys, we don't know anything about offshore. Do you have specific spots, or are you looking for water temperature or current breaks or all the above, or do you have marked spots where fish might?
Well, also too, in conjunction with that, what about side scan? Seeing fish under the water, and you can move your boat because there's a fish over there.
Oh yeah,
because your eyes are underwater as much as they are above the surface.
Yeah, those are apple and oranges questions, but I'll answer both of them. The first one is Nick Smith's words echo in my head. I talked to him 2 or 3 nights ago, and I thanked him for his words. The best place to start sail fishing is where you see one. Sailfish are very visible.
Jumping out of the
Free
water,
jumping,
sails out of the water.
Yeah, boat hooks up. You know, there's a lot of things that can lead to you seeing one. Not to say that's what you drive around till you see one, but the point is, don't ignore it when you see one.
Right.
And know that they congregate. It's much like tarpon and home assassin. So there's a reason they're there. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think 15 is the most I've seen in one bunch tailing down sea. So they are communal. You know, they kind of get together and they like to be around other sailfish. Not to say that always happens, but the point is, don't ignore it when you see it. And of course, there's the obvious color change. Here in Miami, we have a lot of areas where there's shipwrecks, we have ledges, we have natural humps. All those things are a good place to check.
Because they hold bait.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, usually it's more watercolor and a temperature break, and it goes back to food.
How about current line?
Yeah, current line. All that kind of lines up with the color change.
Okay, but say you're fishing for an hour and there's no bites, or 2 hours and there's no bites. Are you moving?
The best friend in that case is a cell phone.
So you guys
Network.
trade information.
Oh, yeah. You got to give good information to get good information. But,
Right.
Honest answers to your friends will usually result in that. And,
Is that available in tournaments?
Yeah.
Still?
Oh, yeah.
Because in flat tournaments, you can't speak to anybody else.
Wow. I mean, I there would be some benefit to that, because then it would really be a test of your individual skills, or as a team, your team's individual skills. But in the sailfish world, they don't. I do know a couple teams that the owner of the boat prohibits, or the captain prohibits communication. But then what happens is you cut yourself off from outside information. So this is what I've said to Peter and Kit before. Yeah, okay, this tournament, I made a call. Someone called me, and yeah, I told them where we were, and they came over here and they beat us. It does happen that way. But don't forget the times.
They can do it to you or help you.
We did it the other way.
Yeah.
Someone gave me information. So that's kind of how it works, at least in my world, is that, the ball bounces both ways, and you just gotta be appreciative when it works your way. Mm-hmm. But I'm a fan of friends. I'm not a fan of enemies. So
right.
I try to just do the right thing and talk. I'm not saying, I've never bumped heads with anybody, but I try hard to always do the right thing and tell the truth.
Right.
I tell my kids, that's my famous line, the truth always comes out in the end. So always tell the truth.
And when you're in a tournament, when you catch a fish, do you have to call in to the weighmaster, whoever the tournament coordinator is, and tell them your location?
Not location.
Not
That's
location.
California.
Okay.
In California, you see that on TV. They have a grid system, and I've seen that multiple times. But here, it's just call in the angler, the boat number, and fish.
Don't you hate that over the radio? You hear them say, "All right, this is so and so. We got 5 on."
Yeah, that can be painful.
But do you ever move positions, or knowing that where that boat is fishing?
Oh yeah, constantly. Yesterday, I ran back and forth 15 miles chasing some condition reports, and honestly, yesterday, I hate to say it, it hurt me, because I was sitting somewhere that I liked. It lines in. And a very good friend of mine called me, and he told me the truth, and I ran 15 miles. But I call it showing up for the funeral. By the time I got there, it was pretty much over. And then I ended up running back, and when I got there, we caught 2 right away and wished I had 3 more hours.
Right.
My point is, you think getting that information is just a home run and you're going to prosper because of it. It does work the other way. So that's part of the thought process too, is it worth it? Is it that much better? So when Charmaine and I fished together, sometimes she'd be down below, and she's very competitive. She'd go inside the cabin where nobody could hear her, and she'd call me on the cell phone because she knew I had my phone on. She'd be like, "What are we doing here?" I go, "Well, I think it's a good spot." She said,
Your daughter.
No, Charmaine. I'm sorry.
Your wife.
Charmaine. Yeah,
Nikki
she was one of the crew.
Me.
Yeah,
He's
she
on the
was,
back. Turns out, really?
Yeah. Well, I got kind of some of those calls.
That's so
and then
funny.
I would have to explain to her why this other area sounds so good, but I would say there's 10 boats there. So
I got to be here alone.
Yeah, we're here alone, and I got a better shot, maybe, and sometimes she was right, sometimes I was right. But the point is, it was funny. I'd get that when the phone would ring, and I'd look down, I'd see it was her. I'd be like, "Oh God, it's like the principal's calling you. What did you do, and why did you do it?"
Hear about this when we get home,
right? But anyways, second, you asked about the sonar. That's a very, very hot topic lately. So these boats are putting that side scan sonar for blue marlin, and I had the privilege of fishing with John Legrone, James, his son, and Andy Moyes, and the owners of the Ohana, and we fished walkers, and my first real introduction to it, and we absolutely marked the fish before we caught them, and even had one time John was kind of giving me a crash course, and I said, "John, looks like two marks here," and we went around. No, they mark them again. You put little marks on the screen, and it stays locked on that GPS position. And we went around, marked them again. They're going this way. We ran around the third time. 2 blue marlin came up. Game changer. Steve Lastly is the ultimate proof of that. He's the one that really introduced it in California. He was a swordfish harpooner for well over a decade, very tuned into the commercial equipment. And he brought the sonar to the sport fishing world, and they won $3.9 million in the Bisbees, marking fish and staying with the fish and rebaiting and rebating and rebating. And they won first and second daily, and the whole tournament won $3.9 million. That's what sparked the how did he do that conversation.
It's interesting because when you mark them on the side scan, you would think that they would turn right away and hear the motor and see the spread and come up. You wouldn't think you'd have to do 3 laps.
There's a benchmark of about 200 feet, 150 to 200 feet, that if they're below that many times, they won't come up. Or it might take a few passes to get them come up. But when they're up above that 150, that seems to be, kind of the golden mark. And even then, they don't always show. I got to fish with John Duffy on the Bill Fisher last fall, right before the White Marlin Open, and he was nice enough to let me bring Dakota, my son, and he caught his first tuna and white marlin, and I was just on the bridge with Duffy watching him work through the sonar, and just shocking how good he was at that. Hey, get ready, coming down the right side. But
Wow.
I think we only caught 1 white marlin that he didn't mark that day. I think we caught 3 whites, I don't know, a dozen, 15 tunas, yellowfins like 50, 80 pounds, and had a blue marlin. All of that got marked before the bite except 1 white marlin. I mean, what
so
a game
if you don't have that those electronics, you're out of the game.
Therein lies the hot topic. So when I fished the Big Rock tournament the last few years, on the entry form they ask you if you have it, and what they're doing is researching correlation between winners and losers, and and what's happening now is some tournaments are actually having a non-sonar division.
I was just going to ask, it's at what point do you lose your guiding angling skills to the electronic world?
I think it's unstoppable. You're not going to ban. I told you earlier.
It's almost like fishing with drones on the flats.
Yeah. I mean, at what point is something too much? And that's
unethical.
The big question. Yeah, and the problem is I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle on sonar. It's a $150,000+ deal. A lot of people who invested, you're not putting it back.
But you got a $15 million boat.
So a couple of years ago, I was fishing with Curly on the Real Addiction. I couldn't remember the name. So she's my historian, and and we won a daily. Caught 3 blue marlin in a day with no sonar amongst all the U.S. boats with sonar. And I felt like I told Curly, I feel like we won the tournament, even if we don't see another fish. You did it. He's an amazing fisherman. But yeah.
I've always wondered in the fly fishing world with tarpon.
Mm-hmm.
My drag over the last almost 40 years has been 3 or 4 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
2 probably.
Maybe 2. So all those fish I've caught has been line drag hanging on the fly line.
Sure.
When you're fishing, because you don't want a heavy drag on your tippet, because when that fish jumps out of the water, it's going to break your line.
Yep.
How much thumb pressure do you have on the spool? Trying to increase the drag when the fish is not jumping or pulling line,
mm-hmm.
and you put that thumb pressure adding line drag or drag
mm-hmm.
when you lift. Is
mm-hmm.
that really important in your game?
I think it's the single most important aspect of angling that gets talked about the very least. It's probably the biggest part of success. Everything from heavy tackle, to even light tackle. Finger pressure at the proper time is the difference in rolling that fish around. When you're fighting a fish, what you really want to do is visualize what is the orientation of that fish. Fish is running. He's going away from me. Slows down. His angle probably changed. So now instead of going away from you, he may be still swimming at the same speed, but now he's swimming. If he swims sideways to you, it's not going to pull any drag, very little. And so now's your opportunity when he slows down to hold that spool, obviously not 4 fingers at once, but 1 finger, 2 finger, test the fish. That's what I would call it. I'd say test them. A lot of the anglers I fished with for a long time, and whether you're pinching, in our world you can, conventional reel,
you pinch the line against
thumb,
right.
Pin now makes a lot of rods with a flat spot. We've talked about it a lot, and I don't know who all they listen to, but that flat spot's what we live with for just say a charter angler. It's a very simple way to apply that extra couple pounds of pressure.
And not on the spool.
But the guys that are very experienced will lay their fingers, when they're not cranking with the right hand, they might pinch and put, 1, 2, 3 fingers on the spool as they're lifting. And what you've done now is, if let's just use the number, 4 pounds of pressure stalled that fish out where he was going this way. He's getting tired. Now he's kind of swimming, but he's not able to pull line off the reel, but he's maybe just basically swimming in a radius. Well, now you put that finger pressure, and what happened to his head? It slowly rolled towards you. So now that phase of pulling should happen slowly. Quick drop.
Now you can be really aggressive.
And now so the key is, think about, this is the really important part. When you drop to wind, if you take your time dropping down, what did he just do?
You cannot take your time.
No, quick as you can go.
That's why, we use really big of fly reels as Hardy can make.
Yep.
So you can crank. And a lot of people think the large reel is for chasing fish. I think it's for fighting fish, because you can hold that fish's head high in the water, and you can crank down and still hold his head. Because once they get their head, you're toast.
Yeah. Nick Smith and I was with him when he caught his first blue marlin on fly in Venezuela. And I was one of the teaser guys, and that was we stayed in the same hotel room, just shared a room. And at night, the first day, we broke a tippet, and had a few problems, and he was just really and he is another Peter Wright, just very intelligent, very analytical. And he's, man, he had quite a bit of drag, in my opinion. He had quite a bit of drag on the reel on strike. And I said, just go down lighter. You got a direct drive reel. You want the drag, you can crank the handle. And you can hold the spool. In other words, you don't have to. You want to make sure that you don't break that fish off in a run, because it goes back to Peter Wright's commentary on line drag. And so I'm always a fan of lighter drag. A lot of people get on my boat and they check my drags on sailfish, and they're like, "This is not much." There. It's because of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of applying pressure at the right time. When he wants to run, if your drag's light, 99% of the time you'll never break a line.
Right.
And anyways, that's kind of our deal.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that a fish in the water, if it's not swimming, is only 10% of its body weight.
Right.
And when he jumps out of the water, he's 100%. So when you have a 100-pound tarpon landing, jumping out of the water, he's now 100. Mm-hmm. And if you have a heavy drag, that 16-pound test is going to blow.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was just wondering, because you preset your drags, and that's what I was wondering about, pressure on those reels.
I think we do it the same way.
Yeah.
Light to fight, and heavy on the fingers.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about Nick. Isn't he caught he's a big fly guy, right, for billfish?
Yeah.
His numbers are insane.
Yeah, he's another Peter Wright. He's another one that I don't know that anybody will. I don't know. I may be wrong, but I don't think anybody will match what he's done in his life. I was building my first boat in '99. I'd worked for the Bob Lewis's boss, the Kelly Tractor Group, in '79 and '99. Now I'm building my boat. I'm single. I have a daughter. That's how the name of the boat came around. And here comes Nick, because he had heard what's happened. Now I'm divorced and trying to make a go of it. And he unexpectedly said, "Hey, you want to fish some tournaments together? Because now I'm not working for a private boat anymore. We can charter." I'm like, sounds great. I think I'd like to do that. And that began one of the most unbelievably educational and fun fish together a few years that just I'll never forget. And he would do things that I've never seen a human do. I don't know anybody can do it. We missed a sailfish one time, twice, which he never did. I got picked off on one and just missed one. I don't know why. Just maybe dog boned it and Nick wound and the bait, hook pulled out of the bait, whatever. He was furious, and it was southeast wind, north current. The fish are swimming against the current going south. We had kites over the weed line, a little color change there, and I knew that if we could get a little jump on them, I could get ahead of them and we'd get another shot at them, because neither fish jumped. They were probably going to bite again. So I, Robbie and Alex were my mates. I'm like, "Hey, we're going to make a jump here." So and I start motoring. I'm doing about 12 knots. I don't want to spook the fish. I'm just cruising, fast trolling speed up the line. The fish are probably swimming 3 or 4 miles an hour. I'm going to get ahead of them. Next thing you know, I see a bait fly west. I'm going south. I'm like, what in the world? I got to get to that spot right up there. And all of a sudden I look back and I see Nick, and he's grabbing the line with his left hand for like 1 second. He's letting line go. 1 second.
With his fly rod?
No, spinner.
Or spinner rod.
1 second. What he's doing is he's testing for resistance at 12 knots. And all of a sudden, he goes, I think I got picked up. Now, I'm not where I want to be. I'm kind of mad. I'm like, what? He's probably seaweed on his bait. He felt something, but pull it back, close the bail. Got him on. I got goosebumps. That's Nick.
Wow.
Well, you know what? You have been so successful in your term career. What made you so consistent for so long? What were you doing differently from anybody else? And you said there's no secrets.
Well, so I had a couple really, really good, hate to go back that far, but my grandfather, my father, they teach you fundamental. That's what I say when a mate gets on the boat. Most of what you need to know, I can't teach you. It's, all the good things it takes to be a good person and, work ethic and all. That's all your parents, right? So my dad and grandfather got, I think it was that plumber attitude. My grandfather, was a hard worker, and it was just that never give up attitude. And that's all any analysis of a sport is never giving up and never stop trying to think of a better way. And I worked behind a house for the Kelly Tractor family from 79 to 99. So I was in a vacuum, and I was young. I was 18 when I started running the boat, and, most of it was just trial and error. So I think that trial and error part, like I said, when it came to taking care of bait, what I know is because I killed a lot of bait. I made a lot of mistakes.
Right.
And then, of course, fishing with Bill Harrison. He was analytical. Bob Lewis, super analytical. And then the crews. I never want to fail to recognize their sacrifices and their hard work and executing all the crazy things I'd ask them to do in experimental phases. And, they did it. And Ed Cattell and I were together for 10 years while we worked for the Kellys, and Fritz Herman. All these guys were just so patient and so hardworking, and that's how you build knowledge. And it's not. There's really no. There's really a minimal amount that I take credit for. I say that a lot of, and the funny part is a lot of times those younger mates would come to you with questions. Why do we do it this way? What if we did it that way? And I swear to you, many of the things that I've felt became an advantage for me came from suggestions.
Interesting.
And so you got to be open-minded and never be that fist-pounding captain that says,
this is
my way. Yeah, you can't do that. And every single person on your team, anglers, everybody, are all smart people. That's what I tell my young mates today. Everybody who steps on this boat, for the most part, is an intelligent, hardworking person, or they're not here, right? They're chartering your boat. That didn't fall out of the sky. They had to work for whatever it took to get them on this boat. And you got to always take that position with people and realize that they might have something to offer that you've never thought about. So always keep your mind open. I think that's that, and just being kind of dumb and tough. That's what you got to do.
And have that will to win. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real treat to hear your stories and people that you've learned from around the world. And keep up the great stuff, and congratulations with your Captain and Crew Hall of Fame induction.
Thank you.
Great to meet you, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Pleasure.
When I saw it's West Side Story, when I saw it's just a